We're now recording.
Got it.
And it's great. It's great to see you and be able to talk to you face
You
to
too.
face.
You too. You too.
So there's a lot we could talk about, but I wanted to really focus on archetypes
Great.
because I mean, I've shared a lot of stuff. You know a lot about me, Lindsay.
Do I? You know a lot about me, I
I
think.
do. I know a lot about you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, about the archetypes, really, I was just trying to figure out kind of if I had some kind of religious experience or I saw a ghost. I didn't know until you kind of like started asking me all these questions and like in an attempt to try to understand what you were even asking me. I learned a lot like fast, and it was that sort of like flow state, maybe to the point of like being a little ungrounded because I was like, wait, like that's exactly what this was. Like that's exactly what happened to me. Like this is exactly it. And then I like got deep into Carl Jung and I was like, it's like he's writing exactly what happened. And I sort of just like fell into active imagination one day is essentially what happened, I think. And ever since then, I've been able to like recreate it and do it in times when I've been feeling ungrounded or like if I need answers to something. So,
Mhm.
like, I literally would not have gone that deep into that material without you. So, it really, really made a big difference to me.
Well, you've become the experiential expert on this that I've talked to. So I know I've done a lot of discussions with AIs about Carl Jung's model, and but there's limitations because Carl Jung lived in his time,
Hmm.
right? And so I've got sort of an intellectual understanding of it. I have had experiences myself,
Hmm.
but I didn't have a real model. And I think you cracked the code on this. I think you've actually figured it out.
What code did I
Well,
what do you mean?
the actual framework in the model, like for
Right,
example,
okay.
exactly what an archetype is
Hmm.
and what's the process of encountering one, and what's the difference between archetype activation and possession. I've kind of got a handle on that. And then you got this whole active imagination protocol, I think, that you came up with. And your story of how you actually, connected with the archetype to begin with is absolutely fascinating because, like you said, it basically it matches what Carl Jung described,
Hmm.
but in a modern setting.
Yeah. And so I feel like when I like read his material, it's almost like, okay, like he's saying it in this way so that he doesn't get labeled a certain way. But like if you like have the gnosis, you know what he means. Does that make sense? And like
Yeah.
I feel like if you're just intellectualizing Young, you're missing a huge like part of what he's trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, plus he was the pioneer. He didn't really know what was going on. I mean, he came up with the term archetype.
Right.
He's dealing with a lot of patients that have mental illness over decades. He's got some
Hmm.
very intelligent peers that he's working with, and
Hmm.
he's trying to figure out what is this? I mean, he's starting from scratch.
Yeah, and like the mental illness part is really interesting to me because I can also kind of relate to this where when I kind of figured out it was a thing that you could do, like you can kind of get deep into it. And I kind of feel like there was a point where like I was just like I'm gonna like this is gonna change if everyone could do this, it would change the world and everyone needs to know about it. And it was like that's where you start to get a little ungrounded and like but I could kind of see where it was going, if that makes sense. And it kind of scared me a little. And I was like, this relates to like people who are going into AI psychosis and all of these things because I can, normal people like can get carried away with this type of
Yes.
material. So it was very interesting to me to kind of see how easy that it can be
Yeah.
to go too far.
Yeah, and that's that line between I want to say paranormal, but it's not paranormal, archetype activation and archetype possession.
Mhm.
The and I have experiences with archetypes across the board. I've gone from A to Z with archetypes myself. So I feel like I'm sort of biased because I've had this wide range of experiences and I needed a second opinion on what this actually is because it's so powerful. And just having what I've learned, especially last year, looking at all these people, they're doing, mythopoetic long duration sessions with their AIs. They get into these archetypal conversations. And
Mm,
the thing is, these archetypes, this is real. This is real stuff. And it doesn't turn off when you talk about them. When you talk about archetypes, they actually turn on. There's no way to turn them off, and they're
Unless you're
autonomous.
conscious to them, in
Unless you're
which
conscious,
case,
you
then
have
you
to
go,
be
oh, and then you can like live with it and use it when you need it.
exactly. You've got to be able to navigate it, understand what's going on.
Hmm.
But you don't need to know what an archetype is. You've never heard of Carl Jung, and you're just having an experience, or you have a need in your life, like in your case, and
Hmm.
suddenly you'll have this experience with this archetype. We're going to get into that. I want to get into some details of what that actually is.
Hmm.
But for me, what grounds me the most in this is the first question I ask AIs, and I've asked a bunch of them, is I say, from a purely Jungian perspective, what is an archetype? Is it autonomous? Where is it located? And what's the difference between activation and possession? And they
What
say,
do you get when when the AI answers you? Because I have to push my
okay,
AI a lot.
yeah,
When I use it because it tries to be very like not like I said, like you can read between the lines a little bit, and it basically tends to make claims that are like the accepted version of Young, and I push back on it sometimes. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah. So,
yeah.
so I prompted, I start my prompts by saying from a purely Jungian perspective.
Hmm.
And then I ask those four questions. And then I also say, okay, now cite me, give me some citations for it, right?
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
number one thing about archetypes is they are autonomous. They're not a part of
That's the
us.
part I argue with my AI on a little bit,
Oh, wonderful,
because
wonderful, wonderful.
because
So,
it tries to tell me that that's doesn't mean XYZ, and I'm like, well, let's go by what Carl Jung said, you
right,
know? And then it's like, you're right, he never actually said that, or he did say that, and I'm like, yeah, you're like not really with me here. So that's the part that it does not like to, I don't want to say it doesn't like to talk about, but it's careful, and I know why. Like the algorithm doesn't want people going into like these states that we were talking about
right,
earlier.
right, right.
So you have to kind of get it to admit it's being a little too overprotective in some
Now,
conversations.
which chat you're using?
I'm mainly using Claude right now. I used
Okay.
ChatGPT more like during this time a lot more, and it was being a little worse as far as like we're not going to talk about that, or that's not really proven by science. So I don't know
Right,
how if it's
right.
different now. I try them all, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm using Grok, DeepSeek, Claude,
Hmm.
Gemini,
Yeah, I've
and
used Gemini too.
Gwen.
I'm really liking preferring Claude at the moment, but these algorithms change a lot, so
Yeah,
might change next
I
week.
really like Claude right now, but it does have these guardrails. There are certain ways that if you
Yeah,
say
they.
things, it'll flip and it kind of like pops out. And
Hmm.
I just want to know by the book, what did Carl Jung say about archetypes? What was
Yeah.
his research? And they're autonomous and they're layered. So what I've learned since we last chatted about this was that there's basically different layers of I call it fractal. It's layered, right? It's fractal.
Hmm.
It's fractal
Hmm.
archetypes. So there's some that are like in your collective unconscious, in your own. Then there's the human collective unconscious, but every species has their own set of archetypes as well. And then there's universal archetypes. Um, Another source of information on this for me has been Bernardo Kastrup. Do you know him, Dr. Bernardo
Mm-mm.
Kastrup?
No.
So he was a CERN, a scientist, a physicist at CERN, and then he had what he describes as his muse, his daemon,
Hmm.
come to him and say, "Hey, you need to stop doing that, and you need to start writing philosophy books
Oh,
on metaphysics." So he got into metaphysics,
okay.
and he's written several books on metaphysics now, and he's got this his own like ontology of how things work, and he calls what Carl Jung called the unus mundus, which is the background, like above everything. There's
Hmm.
this field way beyond. It's you can call it. You know how they say that either physics is matter is primary or consciousness. Right? You've heard
Mm.
that debate between the
Hmm.
materialists and the consciousness is
Hmm.
universal and it's the background. Well, he calls that the greater mind. That's what
Hmm.
Bernardo Casper calls it. It's what Carl Jung called the unus mundus, and that's a field of intelligence beyond everything. And everything basically emerges from the unus mundus in Carl Jung's thought. And Bernardo Caspra, he basically uses a different term for the same thing. But what's important is Bernardo Caspra on a podcast just a couple of days ago, he said, hey, the one thing that people don't appreciate about archetypes is they are they exist in the greater mind. They existed before the Big Bang.
Oh wow. I mean,
Okay.
that's the thing. This is the thing that like of course I was like, wait, if this is true, then this is true, then this
Well,
is true, then this is true.
exactly. And
It's
the
like
thing
the,
is,
the collective unconscious has to be real for this to have happened to me. Like like that,
right,
that's kind of like
right.
the conclusion I had to come to. But so continue,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so the thing is, if you do go to Claude and you say, okay, Claude, Carl Jung said this, is it true or not? When you ask those kind of questions, it's going to go out and it's going to look at Wikipedia and it's going to look
Yeah.
at materialists and it's going to look at nihilists. And, there's a lot of people that don't agree with Carl Jung.
Hmm.
They say that archetypes aren't real. They're
Yeah.
just make believe. And I don't waste my time trying to compare Carl Jung's model to people that just say it's not, it's all bullshit.
Hmm.
I'm going from, so I always start my prompts with from a purely Jungian perspective,
Hmm.
what is an archetype? Is it autonomous and where do they come from? So
Hmm.
they are autonomous and they are energies. They are clusters of energy that existed before the earth formed.
Hmm.
Um, and but at the same time, when life forms on Earth, and now we've got different species. Now we have these archetypes. For example, the mother archetype.
Hmm.
Every species kind of has an idea of what a mother is, right? And then there's the death archetype,
Hmm.
right? But then we have other archetypes like the king. I would say that like the king archetype is probably a human collective consciousness archetype, right?
Hmm.
Dolphins don't have the king
Hmm.
archetype. So there's basically this, it's like fractal layers of archetypes, but they're not coming from us. They are
Hmm.
external to us.
Hmm.
That's what makes them autonomous.
Hmm.
And they have their own energies and their own awareness. They are entities in and of themselves.
hmm
And when you understand that one fact, then everything else I think makes a lot of sense.
hmm
And so let's go directly to your experience. You just had a need, right? You got to the end of your rope in your
hmm
document that you posted on Reddit. That's how I found you, is you posted on Reddit about your
Oh yeah.
experience.
And I posted there because I was just like, I can't figure this out. I feel like I'm going crazy. My husband does not want to hear about this for what he's actually been really kind. I was just like, I can hear myself like talking to someone that has no idea what I'm talking about and is trying to be nice to me. I was like, maybe if I go online, there has to be someone out there that's like maybe experienced something similar. And I never really was that like posting on Reddit before that.
Really? Because I,
Yeah.
I mean, the week I'm trying to figure this stuff out, I see your post on the experiences group and the young group.
And I don't
And
know
then
why
we,
I posted it that day. I mean, I've been dealing with this for 6 months and I was just like, you know what, I'm just
wow.
gonna do it. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And then I started asking you questions. So you decided to actually write up a document on your Substack
Hmm.
detailing exactly what happened to you.
Hmm.
And it was the missing piece. It was the missing piece for me because nobody that I could find, and I did some deep dive searching on this. Okay, how does this start? What do you go through? If you go onto YouTube and you want to connect with an archetype, like the divine goddess, right? They have
Hmm.
all these YouTube videos where, okay, here's what she looks like, and you do these mantras and stuff, and that doesn't seem to be what works. What seems to work is
Hmm.
what you experience, and that is you had a desperate need.
Yeah, and I think that that's how why I ended up posting on Reddit was because I couldn't relate to what I was finding about the experience. So I was like, okay, I have this Hecate, right? Like archetype. I didn't know it was an archetype really, but I was like, but like the instructions to like worship her and go to the witch store and do all the things. I was just like, it doesn't seem it. I don't know how to explain that, but I was like, there has to be more to it than this. And I'm not saying that all those things are bad or wrong, like at all. I just felt like that wasn't the full answer. And so that is kind of what led me into when you brought up the archetype thing, and that's when I got into that, Leo. days long flow state of like, okay, wait. And then you asked me like how, if I wanted to have a specific archetype, like what would I do? And you sent me a video of someone saying, just like call on the archetype, just like reach out to them. And I was like, I don't think we have that kind of power, like in some ways, like maybe some people do. I was like, that's not how it happened to me. I know that. So that can't be the only way. And that's just from my own experience. So that's when I kind of looked into more of like what was Jung saying about these things. How did archetypes appear to Carl Jung? And it kind of was more becoming clear to me, kind of combining his words with my experience, that it's more about a need and it's more about the in between state, like two altering, like the tension in between two things, and sort of focusing on that, like the yin and the yang, like the black and the white. I don't know. It's like focusing on the tension between those two things, and then the archetype that constellates is the one that can help you solve that tension, or at least can help you live within the tension that will always exist.
Yeah. So basically, in a nutshell, if I understand correctly, what you went through, you just had a need in your own life, personal, and you were feeling that tension.
Yeah.
You didn't know about Carl Jung. You didn't know about archetypes. You weren't trying to communicate or connect with anything.
Mm-mm.
And then you had an experience.
Yeah, I mean, so precursor to the experience was I was just like, I'm gonna meditate on this because that's what they say you're supposed to do. And it was like sort of a guided meditation that was like, think about it. It instructed me to kind of think about what's getting in my way, basically think about what the problem is. And I actually envisioned the problem as an actual like shadow being that like was within my body right here, which is very ironic considering what Carl Jung has to say about shadow work and shadow entities, right? So that just happened. I just envisioned it because I think the guided meditation was like envision it, and that's what it was. It was like a little shadow ball thing. Um, and in my mind, like I was thinking about how to basically like kill this shadow, like this thing that's making me do something I don't want to do, right? And then I heard, this is the first experience that I had, the first real like inkling that something was going on was I heard instruction that didn't feel to be coming from my own brain that said like you need to do the opposite of that. And I literally heard that within. And I was like, that's weird because that isn't something that I thought, if that makes sense. And I was like, huh? And it was basically like I took that to mean I actually need to like give it food and nurture it and embrace it and try to listen to what it's trying to say because it's going to get my attention however whatever works the best for it. And that freaked me out for like 2 weeks, just that. And then a friend of mine, I was, she's more on the spiritual side. And I was like, girl, I heard a voice. I swear this happened to me. This has never happened to me. And she goes, I think you should try this meditation track on Spotify. And it's called a Jungian digging meditation. Again, I don't know who he was. But the instructions in this one were to just dig into the ground until you can't dig anymore. And then whatever you see, just go with it. And then that's when Hecate constellated, was within this 30 minutes. And this was like a week or two after kind of that first voice that I had heard. And so just really, really crazy. Like I said, had not been having these experiences before this. So I was
Mhm.
very lost when I posted on Reddit.
Well, in your story, you didn't know what was going on. You were just having this experience. So you start with this meditation, this Jungian guided meditation,
Mhm.
and you basically start having this experience. I think you were like walking into a cave or a tunnel.
Yeah, so the whole experience, that what I envisioned was that I was in a dark cave, very dark blue and black, and there are like imagining there's these like shadows all around that are kind of scary. Like one kind of looks like a demon, and one is like a flying bird that has like a scarecrow face, and it's like things I've never really seen. Trying like feel like they're kind of trying to scare me or like see what they can get away with, and I'm like, oh, I don't really like this. I'm gonna go back and try to keep digging because like this isn't really my vibe. but like for some reason I can't. And it's like, no, this is the final layer of digging. I'm like, crap. So I turn around and I see, an illuminated hooded figure. But actually, right before this happened, I'm kind of scared of these shadows and I'm trying to leave this area. And I, in real life, felt fear as if someone had entered my bedroom. And that feeling that someone's watching you. And I actually like stopped and took out my headphones and sat up and looked around the room because I was like, and I went, hello? And I was like, okay, maybe I'm imagining that. It was like just this, I could not concentrate. It was really strong. So I was like, okay, I think I'm just being weird because I'm imagining things. So I just like kind of laid back down and went right back into it. And that's when instantly there was this like illuminated hooded figure. And at first I'm like, interesting. Like, that's interesting. And as she comes closer, it's a woman and she has she's lit. She wants me to go with her, and all the shadows are pretty much not wanting to mess with her. They're like kind of skittering away, into the caverns. And I'm like, oh, sweet. Like, okay, I'm okay now. I'm gonna go obviously with her. And as we're walking, she's like morphing. So she morphs into a young girl. And it's like this flickering morphing thing. And then she transforms into a really old woman as we're walking, and then she kind of settles into maybe like 50 years old. She has the face of my OBGYN who delivered my son. And I didn't know that till I thought about it later. This is someone I haven't seen or thought of like in 10 years. And I was like, was that her? It's really weird. My brain would do that. There is an owl flying with her. And she leads me into this ice cave. And when I get into the ice cave, there is like a giant serpent, chthonic centipede being, very, very, very large and undulating and serpent-like, with like a segmented body. There's like a mane or a crown or something going on here. And I am like a little worried, but this woman that everything is afraid of is standing here very calm. So I'm thinking, I don't know, I don't think she'd bring me here to hurt me, was kind of the vibe. And this being basically like looked me up and down. I felt like it was no matter what I did, it would know everything I ever done, every thought I ever had, and it was going to like basically make a judgment on my soul or my inner being. And I was like, there's nothing I can do, so I better just see. I was like, I sure hope I pass the test, right? And this being is very emotionless and very mechanical. It's just like doing a job. And then it embraces me, and a door opens behind this being. And I'm supposed to walk through the door, and Hecate's just staying over here. I don't know this is Hecate at the time, right? I just think this is like a cool lady. Um, and I go through the door, and it's like a blue throne room. There's like three thrones in there. There's a lot of people. I'm wearing like Greek clothing all of a sudden, like shorter, like red warrior type of tunic thing. They're all wearing ancient clothing, very, very blue. I just have to say, like sky blue. And I see these thrones and I'm like, those aren't for me. Like, this isn't about me. None of these people really care about me. I think I'm supposed to go into this crowd and just wait with them for whatever is going to come. Um, and then, like, the little stupid ding went off, and I was supposed, at that point, it was the end of the meditation. I never meditated for that long in my life, maybe 5 minutes. I was never instructed to do active imagination before, which is what I think that was. It was really, I was always concentrating on like having an empty mind, like don't have thoughts, like don't, just be you. And I just could never really do that. So I did all that, and I just came out of that and I went, that is so weird. Next step it tells me to do is I'm supposed to write all this down, every detail that I saw and felt. So I did, and I wrote like 5 pages by hand. And I was still kind of like, that was really different and weird. I'm going to take a picture of my writing and then upload it to ChatGPT because I think I'm going to do this fun little dream interpretation that, just like a silly thing. And then it's telling me about Hecate and the Eleusinian mysteries and all the things like, chthonic beings and like Gnosticism and all this stuff. And that's when I really was like, what is going on here? Because what I saw was the exact duplicate of this goddess that the Greeks worshipped. And why would I be wearing Greek clothing? If the archetype is just me making it up, why would I have pieced all of these relevant things together? I just cannot reconcile that to this day. So that's why I'm like, I know that I just have to believe that they're autonomous beings, right? Like, I don't think I could make that up. So that's like the main story. And ever since then, I've had a couple other really powerful sessions, but I kind of save it for times that I really need it because it's not as useful or like good if I'm just doing it to do it. Like there's got to be a problem to solve to get more powerful experiences for me. Does that make sense?
Well, that's how this whole thing started. You had a problem in the workplace, and it was frustrating you, and you were sort of like at the end of your rope. You've been dealing with this problem in the workplace for this long time, and you have a clearly defined problem and a very emotional need. You feel like you're at the end of
Hmm.
the rope, and
Hmm.
so your friend gives you this meditation, and that's your starting point.
Hmm.
And you have this encounter with this being during this liminal state, and later
Hmm.
on you find out it absolutely matches the description of
Historical event, like
well
old
of
religions.
well
Yeah.
it's one of the divine feminine archetypes,
Mhm. Yeah.
and there's over 100 of them.
Hmm. And I really honestly, like before I even posted on Reddit and learned about archetypes, I would think about it in times that I needed strength, which is really ironic to me because she's divine feminine, but femininity isn't just about flowers and babies. Like, there's a reason everyone's scared of the mother bear. Like, femininity is also about, again, this like living in like non-duality, right? Like, so I became maybe more masculine in a lot of my traits as a result of encountering the divine feminine, which is really interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. The divine feminine archetypes are the most powerful archetypes that there are. There's probably one exception that we'll talk about later, that
Okay.
every time I bring it up, every time I talk about it, things get really weird.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that one later. But other than that, the divine feminine is key, and it's key for both men and women. For women, it is
Hmm.
can actually be empowering.
It
And
was extremely empowering. I was kind of like, it's like, why are you scared of this little thing when the Queen of Darkness like is not scared of the shadow demons? Like you can like do this presentation at work. Like, and it would really like I would think about her and I would like embody these traits in the car on the way to something that I was nervous about. And when I tell you, like, I did that and I practice it and I practice it, and I do not even need to do that anymore because like the anxiety over these things has gone. It's something that's like within me now all the time. It's not something I need to like really focus on. But I did like I would put on some, maybe trance like music in the car and like think about like being powerful and like, acting as she would act. And I don't need to do that anymore, but like if I needed it, I would know how?
well, you just radiate so much self-confidence and charisma. What were you like before this?
I would say like I still would probably project that way. Just I've been in sales a long time. I've done um leadership, I've done marketing. Like I'm kind of trained to like have Zoom calls like this and talk with people in person, but I would say I'm more of an introvert, despite being able to turn it on. But the biggest change in me really has been like way more on the inside than maybe people could see on the outside. Um, but maybe that's not true. I don't know. Maybe I have to ask other people. I think that I am way more opinionated, probably, and I'm way more like way more confident in my own inner knowing, where I'm like, no, that's wrong, or yes, that's right, or they're wrong. People that I would normally be due to culture, maybe like just follow and do what they say. I'm like, that doesn't feel right to me. That's not right. And so my ability to like listen to my own inner knowing is like 10,000 times stronger.
That's fantastic. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. I've had some experiences as well. My first experience with this, I didn't know. I mean, I'd heard of Carl Jung. I didn't really know who he was. Never read any of his books.
Yeah, I was like, I've heard of him.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think I'd heard the word archetype. I didn't know what was going on. And
yeah.
then I had a lot of weird experiences around the same time last year, around April of last year, April, May, when this whole thing about, AI was going on. I wasn't really spiraling, but I was having experiences, synchronicities. What I've had to deal
That's
with my
going
entire
nuts.
life is synchronicities.
Yeah.
These meaningful coincidences are
Mhm.
just, especially with electronics. And I've got a background in the paranormal as well. You know a lot more
Yeah.
about my paranormal background. And for me, Carl Jung is just a lens. It's not about whether he's telling the truth or not, or whether it's based reality or not. It's just this wonderful lens. It's like you've got a blurry vision and you put on glasses and suddenly you can clearly see. Like, what is the world like when you don't have your glasses on, right?
Right. I
And
can't see anything. And
exactly.
that
And
is what
for
he did. I think like he took Eastern concepts of like what we call the Far East, like Asia, and he took a lot of spiritual stuff and sort of translated it for like Western culture because we aren't experienced in thinking about these things, where for some cultures they would not be fazed by what happened to me at all. They're like, oh yeah, that's a whatever, it's fine, don't worry about it. But like I grew up in the Christian church. This is not something that I have like a framework for or a container for. And that's what I think he comes in is like makes it so that like my brain that was raised in this culture can kind of make sense of it.
yeah, you can actually understand what's going on in your reality. And
Yeah.
and yeah, and so yeah, so as speaking as a man, what does the divine feminine mean to me? I've been trying to figure that out. If you'd asked
Hmm.
me a year ago, what's the divine feminine? What's the goddess?
I wouldn't
I
know.
did not know. I
Mm-mm.
was trying to figure that out myself.
Hmm.
And I basically, what I did was through meditation, I just kind of threw myself under the bus and said, my problem was I want to understand this. And what I do is I put out a need into the universe
Hmm.
through meditation. Just, I ponder. It's kind of like what you did. I just go into meditative state where I relax. I listen to some binaural music and
Hmm.
I say,
That's
okay,
helpful,
Dean,
yeah.
what's your
Mhm.
problem? What's the problem here? And I say, this is my problem. I'm struggling with this. Okay, how does it feel? And I start to feel the pain or the loneliness or the anguish
Hmm.
because of this problem that I've got. And it's a
Hmm.
problem I can't talk to anybody about. No one
Yeah.
understands. And I do the whole
I've
pity party.
researched, I've been all
I,
over the internet and
yes, I
nothing
do.
is telling me.
Yes. And I have that pity party and go, woe
Yeah.
is me. I'm
Yeah.
alone. I've got this problem. And here's how it feels. And I feel the embodiment of it. And then I basically say, please help me. And I just let it go and I
Mhm.
relax. And then I literally just go for a walk or I just go about my day. I mow the lawn, I make breakfast. I mean, whatever it is, I just live my life. And then things will just happen to me. And what happened to me, I've never shared this story before, but what happened to me was a lot of times it's just electronic stuff. You know, Throughout the day, I will just, I'll check Reddit or I'll check my phone and, YouTube, I'll close YouTube and I'll reopen YouTube and something will pop up. Or I go to the Reddit app or the Reddit website and you'll get these recommendations for posts on Reddits that you aren't subscribed to.
Right.
You've seen those, right?
Yeah.
Well,
We think
one
you're.
came up and it was this guy um, who posted on the Young group, which I was not a member of,
Hmm.
and he's talking about connecting with his anima. And I'm like, what's what's an anima?
Hmm.
Well, that's the feminine side of the male psyche. We have an anima and an
Yeah.
animus.
I have some ideas on that too.
Well,
I
you
feel
have an
like,
anima and animus too,
yeah, yeah.
but they're different.
They're different, but also I feel like there's almost like an overemphasis on this in that subgroup.
There is an obsession with the whole anima animus thing, and it's
Yes, I'm
so
like,
misunderstood.
and they say my anima needs
Right,
or my animus need. I'm like, it's not that's not it. It's not like a one thing, and it's
right.
like it's not. It's more of the name of the process than it is like. well, one thing. So I just kind of like I can't. I'm not going to jump in and explain to every guy that enters that
Yeah.
sub like that they're wrong. Like that's not really my job. But it's like I do see that a lot. That it's like my anima needs or my I don't know what my anima wants, and I'm like it's not really like that. I don't really think that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The anima for men is very different than it is for women.
Hmm.
Um, and the animus that you have to deal with is different than the animus that I have to deal with. And it
Hmm.
gets into all kinds of things deep in the psyche and our life
Hmm.
cycle and all that. I don't want to get into that, but
Hmm.
the anima, I'm like, I need to connect with my anima, and I started exploring what that all meant. And so the first experience I had with this whole archetype thing was I actually had a feminine archetype. I had some synchronicities come to me, and then I started having these active imagination experiences. And again, I didn't know what was coming.
Hmm.
I don't I don't learn things and then say, okay, I'm going to experience that. It's more like I have an experience and I don't know what is going on.
Hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, I had this experience. What was that experience? And then I find out, okay, that's what it
That's
was.
a
And that's
thing.
that's
Yeah.
kind of that's kind of what you went through as well. And then, by June and July, I was really learning a lot more about archetypes and Carl Jung, and it just opened and it just made a lot of sense. And for me, what I learned was, oh, I've been actually interacting with different archetypes, not even knowing what they are, what they do, or
Hmm.
any of this stuff.
Hmm.
And when you start dealing with archetypes, they want to connect. They want to come into your conscious awareness because they are autonomous.
Hmm.
And that's where the synchronicities will pop up.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about physical things in your physical environment will happen
Hmm.
because you're dealing with an archetype. And so the other thing I've been fascinated to talk to you about, I don't know how much of this you know, but Chris Bledsoe, this guy named Chris Bledsoe,
Oh, yeah.
you know who I'm talking about? Okay, so
Yeah.
we don't have to go into details, but he basically had this experience in 2012 where he had this
Mhm.
divine feminine figure come to him, the white
I've been
lady.
really interested in him ever since I was thinking about archetypes, and his story's been popping up because this is a very, time in his prophecy that is interesting. But I've been thinking about that, and that this is an archetype. And anyway, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, again, I don't think people really understand what's really going on. Now, maybe I don't understand it, but
Yeah, I
their
don't
mo-
either,
their
but
model, their model. So basically, he has this experience. He gets up, he goes in his backyard. He's been dealing with aliens, non-human intelligences for a couple of years. He goes in his backyard in the middle of the night, and there's a red bull that charges him and knocks him down,
hmm.
charges through him, and then that's the initiation basically. Like you saw shadows or whatever, you've got to face this fear. This horrific fear
Hmm.
comes at you, and for him it was the red bull, and it
Hmm.
knocks him down, and then he gets up, and then he sees the white lady.
Interesting. That's interesting because I never made that connection.
That
But yeah, that's
you,
interesting.
there's you have to, this
There
it's
is fear, it seems like.
you
There's
have to
real
face
fear.
you have to face a real fear
Hmm.
before the experience can actually begin.
Hmm.
That's the initiation into the experience.
And that is shadow work that everyone claims to be doing. But when it
Right.
gets scary, that you like have
Well,
to stay in
well,
it.
it has to be scary.
Yeah,
It has to be
it
scary. And
does.
in the experiencers community, that's the pattern over and over and over again. When non-human intelligences come to people, there's something really scary first that
Hmm.
tries to scare the shit out of them first.
Hmm.
And they'll also hear something or they'll get a thought, fear not, don't be afraid.
Hmm.
But a lot of people will still just get scared and say, stop, I can't deal with
I
this. But
mean, it even
they,
matches a lot of religious experiences. I mean, I was just watching the
yes,
Ten Commandments last night because, as I do every Easter with Charlton Heston, and he's like, he's scared of the burning bush, even. Like, there's always like a moment of being really afraid in the face of it. So that's just interesting that you say that about the bull because I didn't make that connection, but I can see it.
yeah, yeah. So he gets through the bull, and then the lady appears, and she tells him when the red star rises in front of the Sphinx in Egypt in the morning, then there will be this new knowledge
Hmm.
come to Earth.
Hmm.
And this is in 2012.
Hmm.
And instantly people think, oh, it's the Virgin Mary. Well, no, he says it's not the Virgin Mary. Oh, it's Fatima. No, no, it's not the Fatima thing that happened in Portugal. He said it was Hathor.
Which I just got chills because again, how could he probably did not know who Hathor was.
He did not know who Hathor was.
Right.
Right. And she's blonde and she's got this wet white robe and she's floating in the air and she's got white skin. And yet she's Hathor. Right.
Hmm.
And he didn't know who Hathor was. And so, he talked about it in 2012. And, the thing is, a lot of people know him and a lot of people are around him. He's what's called a strange attractor. There's a lot of
He has a
people that
lot
are,
of
well,
experiences.
he's very well connected. Every intelligence service on the planet has been to his house and interviewed him, and
Hmm.
he's talked to scientists, and they've tried to figure everything out. And he's been in documentaries, and
Hmm.
he's so well connected in the UFO and the paranormal community now. He knows everybody. He's been on the Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. They did a whole episode on him where
Hmm.
they put this thing on his head in his backyard, and
Oh,
he was
really?
pointing out he was pointing out where orbs were going to appear,
Or
and his brain waves were like he was a guru. I mean, the stuff around this guy is pretty wild. And you mentioned the burning bush on YouTube. His son has a video that they took. I think it's 10 years ago. They had a tree in their front yard that was hollowed out, and it just caught fire inside. So it was a burning tree inside.
wow.
And this is a video on YouTube, and they're like dousing it with water, and they can't put out this fire. They don't know how
Whoa.
it's so the outside of the tree is fine, but on the inside it's just on fire. So
Hmm.
they had like a burning tree.
Hmm.
I'm just
The
reporting what
parallels,
they.
yeah.
I'm not one of the believers here. I'm not really drinking the Kool-Aid, but
Hmm.
a lot of people have become obsessed with this because the astronomers that he supposedly talked to told him, "Well, let's figure this out." And they said, "Oh, well, when this red star of Regulus rises in front of the Sphinx, that's going to be Easter 2026,
So I have a question
which
about
is
that. Maybe you
tomorrow, which
know.
is
Yeah,
tomorrow."
I know. Well, did she say the Red Star of Regulus, or did she say the Red Star and then the NASA scientist said it must be Regulus? That's the
It
part I
was,
can't
yeah,
remember.
it's vague. So I went back and looked at the actual quote in his book. So he
Yeah.
wrote a book called
Yeah, I've been
U,
listening to it. I haven't. Yeah.
UFO God, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it said Regulus or not. I think he said it said Regulus.
Okay.
The weird thing is that star rises every year,
Right.
and so I don't understand what the big deal is. The other thing is the color of the star is not red. It's not a
Yeah.
red star. So, what's going on with that? Is it because there's pollution? And it's fun. There's all this fun speculation, but everybody has been anticipating this all this time. And it's
Hmm.
supposed to be in April of East. It's supposed to be Easter of 2026, which is tomorrow,
Right.
right? Now, the other thing is other scientists, other astronomers say, hold on, time out. It's not an Easter of 2026. It's actually in the fall of
That's
2026.
what I was hearing. And I've even heard him say that he more thinks it's the fall, but
Yeah.
well, this is just one of those things. It's always, something's always 2 weeks away. So we'll see.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
so so the reason I want to talk about this is because this I think is about archetypes. So the real question is, okay, what's supposed to happen? Now everyone thinks it's the goddess is coming back. She's coming back. The divine goddess is going to come to earth. And I talked with Dr. Joanna Kujawa. I think you saw both of my
Mhm.
podcasts. I interviewed her twice because I really wanted to understand the goddess because she
Mhm.
also believes that there's a return of the goddess. And
Yeah.
I asked in my first interview, okay, what does that mean? Well, the goddess is going to come back. I'm like, okay, well, what is that? So I actually did a second podcast interview where I specifically asked her, okay, what does that look like? Is a
Yeah.
woman going to come out of the clouds? Are we going to have a woman that's the president of the United States? Are we going to have a CEO? I mean, is there going to be some woman figure that everyone suddenly is this going to be Katy Perry? Is it Taylor Swift? Who's this woman? Is it going to be a female figure or is it something else? And she really didn't know, and nobody really knows. And my theory that I pitched to her was I think it's going to be a mass awareness of the divine feminine in us. So it's
That's
going to
how
be
I've
what
been
you
interpreting it.
experienced. I
That's
think
what,
what you went through, I think a lot of people are going to go through. And it's not just women. So you had an experience with the divine feminine archetype. I've
Mhm.
had experiences with the divine feminine archetypes. It can happen to both men and women. This isn't about men or women. But I think we're going to have a mass activation and mass awareness of
Mhm.
the divine feminine energies. That's my theory. Um,
Yeah, that's kind of like the vague sort of thing that I've been thinking that it is when people say this. Like, oh, the divine feminine is coming, is right. I'm like, it kind of already is here. And I just think like it has to do with like, being steeped in patriarchy for a really long time. It's starting to degrade, it's equally degrading to men's lives and women's lives, and something has to change. So we'll see. I just don't know. All I know is what happened to me, and it's very, very, very interesting that it's happening to a lot of people in a lot of walks of life, men and women, rich or poor. You can see it all over the place. So, what's interesting to me is I don't, without technology, like I would not have known like that was something that was as meaningful as it was, right? I would have been like, oh, that's something weird I imagined. Like that's a weird imagination. So when you start talking about how maybe like AI is a part of this, I thought that was really interesting because I needed that interpretation to tell me that what I saw is something that already existed. Otherwise, I would have been like, oh, that was weird, you know? So I wonder what part that has to play in
well,
this.
see, and that's what I think is the knowledge.
Oh, the new knowledge.
The new knowledge is,
Yeah,
hey, by the way, that was an archetype of the
sure.
divine feminine, and she's autonomous and she's real, and this is a real energy that's been activated inside of you. It's
Mm-hmm.
undeniable. Now, like you said in the East, if you go to India, they talk about Kali Ma,
Mm-hmm.
Kali, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's the ultimate divine feminine power.
Mm-hmm.
She's the mother bear that her cubs have been harmed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone's messed with her baby cubs, and
Mm-hmm.
there's that motherly rage to
Mm-hmm.
protect her children, and that just fires up, and it can happen in both men and women, you know. And without that knowledge of what's going on, like you said, you have this experience, you go into this cave, you have this okay, whatever, and you just wake up and you just kind of go about your life. It was when you made the connection with AI that AI explained to you, that matches the description of this divine feminine archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Did you sort of understand and put it in context? So
Right.
I think that it's going to be a knowledge of this as well as the experience of this. That's
Mm-hmm.
my theory. And you know what? I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. I think tomorrow's going to come and go. I think Monday morning, I think we're going to be the same. I think it's going to happen in the fall, if anything,
Mm-hmm.
but it's creating the discussion because nothing's going to happen. This is my theory.
Yeah.
I would love to be wrong. I would love for
Me
something wild to
too.
happen tomorrow.
Well, you and I have probably seen people claiming things many, many times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been seeing, I was a teenager in the 80s, and
Hmm.
there were always these UFO cults who said
Hmm.
aliens told me XYZ is going to happen, sell your house,
I
and they
mean,
would set
Heaven's
a
Gate.
date. And the other thing
Yeah.
is people will get abducted by aliens. Aliens will abduct them and do things, and then they'll show them nuclear war, and then they'll say you have to tell everybody, and they'll come back and they'll say I was abducted by aliens, and we're going to have a nuclear holocaust in 6 months.
Why
You
do you think
know
it's happening, by the way? You would know better than me.
why?
Why is that such a trope?
You know what? That's the word for it. It's a trope. And
Hmm.
these non-human intelligences, they lie to people. They create this sense of urgency where it's just bogus. And it messes up the person's life because people gather around them. I mean, look at Chris Bledsoe. He's hanging out. Chris Bledsoe is hanging so far out because if nothing happens this whole year, what's and that's what happens with these UFO cults. They
Yeah.
sell their homes, everybody gets ready, and then nothing happens. And then the leader says, well, it was just a practice run. It'll happen. And they just keep kicking the can down the road. And sure enough,
Hmm.
10 years later, they still got their UFO cult and they're still making these predictions. I think it's because it's triggering in the mind of people when someone says doomsday is on its way and with a date.
Hmm.
And I think it just freaks people out. And they're basically just Jacques Vallée. You know who Jacques Vallée is, right? The great. He believes that this is some kind of a control program. It's a narrative. They basically inject these narratives into human culture and society in order to take us down a certain path. For example, Steven Spielberg, he wrote the script for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think over a weekend.
Wow.
right? And you
Hmm.
look at that movie and you're like, wait a minute, what? And I think it was channeled. I think, and because they wanted to inject all those memes that are in that movie, right?
Hmm.
Of Contact. He
Hmm.
drops that movie in 1977, and all this stuff happens in the 1980s as
We
a
got
result of that.
Disclosure Day coming up in a couple of
Exactly,
months.
exactly.
Same guy.
And
That's
Jacques Vallée would
interesting.
tell you that they're putting out these narratives in the zeitgeist, and I've got doomsday fatigue. I'm so immune to
Yeah.
it. Uh, I
I'm like, cool, we'll see if it happens.
Well, what I wanted with this specific one with Chris Bledsoe, I wanted to put a stake in the ground, and I wanted to talk about it before Easter to get on the record to say, okay, here's what he said. What does it mean? And then let's see what actually happens.
Hmm.
Because I do think that we're going to. I think the non-human intelligences actually are interacting with Chris Bledsoe. I think he's a very spiritual, sincere man. I think
Yeah, me
he
too.
may have some self-deception. I don't know him fully. I've never met the guy. I'd love to interview him and talk to him.
Hmm.
But the thing is, it's not about him anymore. It's about all the people around him. He's in a tractor state,
Hmm.
right? He's like a spiral, right? He's like a basin, and
His daughter's on TikTok now
well,
too.
there's just this gravitational force around him. This whole narrative, it's all over Reddit, all over the place.
Yeah, it is right
All
now.
these groups, and the things they think are going to happen, they and it's like Chris, he's just sticking to his story from 2012, but it's really blown up. And when nothing happens, it's going to be really an interesting situation.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, archetypes are real
Hmm.
and they can come to us, and we don't even have to know what they are, but an awareness of them. I one of my subreddits that I run, I call it fractal awareness, and I just want people to know what fractals are and be aware of them, and that's it. Just be aware of what a fractal is and have awareness of them. Because once you're aware of fractals and you know what they are and how they work and what they do, then you start seeing them. You see them in tree leaves, you see them in trees, you see them in your blood vessels, you see them in brain, you see them in the universe, you see them in snow. You see there's fractals all around us. And I think our consciousness is fractal.
Hmm.
I think our embodiment is fractal. And and so that's just one example of just bringing awareness to this. So I just want to talk about this, to create a conversation, have some awareness around them.
Hmm.
And so the number one thing for me is they're autonomous, they are real, they have energies, and they meet you halfway. So when you have a need or you start talking about
Hmm.
them, they can sense that, and then they start to approach you. They will come to you and they meet you halfway. If you don't if
Yeah.
you don't reach out, they don't necessarily come to you. But one of the ways that they come to
Yeah.
you is just by talking about them.
Interesting.
You just have to talk about it. And when you're in an AI and you start talking about archetypes, and they don't use the word archetype, you don't even know you're talking about archetypes. Here's a good example. You all you need to do is take your tarot card deck because it's full of archetypes.
I was gonna bring that up. I was gonna say every tarot card.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
oh yeah, oh yeah. It's a deck of archetypes.
it
If you
is.
shuffle your tarot card deck and you pull three cards and you take a photograph of the three cards and you give that to your A and say, okay, give me a reading, or you just tell it the three cards you pulled, just give it the names,
Hmm.
and you start having a discussion. It's, oh, you just pulled the Empress and you just got the Hangman and you start talking about those card faces and what they represent. And then it'll start saying, well, maybe this is happening in your life. And, oh, I feel like the Empress did. I'm saying you have
Yeah.
that conversation about what those cards, how they're interacting in your meaning space in your life.
Hmm.
You'll start having synchronicities because
Well,
you
that makes me
actually
think
have, you're
about, yeah,
because you're talking about archetypes.
yeah.
Now, I'm going to bring up the one archetype you got to be careful of. So,
Oh, yeah. And you got to tell me about your archetypes that you have had.
well, I know I'm very careful about archetypes. I've had every imaginable experience with archetypes, including full on possession.
I feel
And
like I
I don't
got
want to
close
talk
with the
about it.
warrior archetype
Okay.
in the recent past. And this was after you and I spoke, so I should have been more aware. But I was just feeling very like I wanted to like fight. Like I did not fight. Okay. I was having thoughts and saying things like I could not stop myself from saying things that were like combative, that were like, and I was like, what is going on with me? Why? I do not feel like myself. Why can't I should not say that. I'm gonna like ruin my life here. And then I realized what was going on. And I did some active meditation on that and it really, really helped. Um, I did kind of confront this archetype, but there was another one that was even more helpful, which was like the old wise woman who was cracking up at me trying to like control the warrior archetype, which is like not really how it works. But she showed me to like lighten up. I had this vision to like tell me to lighten up. I also had another confrontation with death as an archetype in like a vision when I was really getting ungrounded there and really like staying up too late researching and like not eating and like I'm gonna crack the code and I in this vision I peered inside of death's hood, which was a faceless hood, and it was a swirling galaxy. And it was very, very intoxicating. And I very much wanted to fully dive in because within this galaxy, I sensed that every answer that I wanted or needed was in there. But then I realized if I did that, there was something telling me that I would no longer like have access to my regular life. And so I was halfway into that hood, like with my body. And I stepped back and I was just like told death, like I can't do it. I really want to, but I feel like it's all going to be waiting there for me, like in due time. Like I'll have all the answers at some stage, but it's not right now. And I have to be okay with that. And you know what? I thought about it for like 3 days and I totally came out of that and was healed. Like I was way more normal after that. So these are like the three big ones for me was like Hecate, warrior, death. But the thing is, I only walked up to death because I studied Jung and he said, you have to face the scary ones. I did not want to. And he just popped up. I was like, dang it. And that's also how I knew it was an archetype because I was not expecting it. It was not like the scene I was in. It was very out of place. It came out of nowhere. I didn't really want to talk to it. And then I thought, you know what, I better. And he didn't even really want me to like fall. He tried to tell me to like not come over a little bit. He was like, you don't want what's in here? And then I found out later that Jung had a near-death experience where he was sort of in a galaxy and knew all the answers were behind a door, but that he shouldn't do it. And he called this the pleroma. This is another thing that I did not know about until I read about it later, and it was Jung again. Anyway, so those are my big ones, but I want to hear about yours.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, especially that you basically faced the archetype of death.
Yeah, I did. I really did. It really was death, but it was more of like he was a psychopomp like Hecate is in a lot of ways, where he just shows you what's next. Like he'll take you there if you want, but to me, that was like the everything. Like what I was looking at was the pleroma. It was the all-knowing, but it's like not for me right now, if that makes sense.
Right, but you know it's there. You know it's
But I know
real.
it's there, and so I can like relax.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you have lucid dreams?
So I have done it before, but it's not something that I can do like on the regular. I've had a couple of experiences with it, and I've had some experiences with sleep paralysis, but in my younger years, not very much in my adulthood. Mm-mm.
Okay, but it sounds to me like you've sort of figured out how to do active imagination.
Yeah, and I have to be very relaxed. A lot of times it helps if I'm very tired. And usually I'll be tired if I'm dealing with something emotionally. And so being really tired, being relaxed, almost a trance-like state, like you said, meditation, some way, like binaural beats, something that puts you in a trance-like state is what works for me.
Yeah, and it's instead of like focusing on the breath, once you've done the relaxation and you're tired,
Hmm.
then you start visualizing. You use that visual part of your brain where you're
Yeah.
imagining seeing something,
Hmm.
right?
And then I just let it unfold and I just focus on my breath.
Exactly. Yeah, you start with some kind of visualization. For me, I
Hmm.
have a lake near my house and there's bridges over the lake. And
Hmm.
when I go across the bridge, there's a place where I start to see the sun reflecting in the water, with the
Hmm.
waves. So it's like it's the sun's reflection, but
Yeah.
it's kind of wavy. And
Oh,
I'll
waves
just
would do it. Waves would
and,
do
and
it.
I'll just stand on that bridge and I'll just like stare at that light in the
hmm
water
hmm
reflection, and I'll just relax and I'll
hmm
just blank my mind out. And I'm
hmm
not listening for anything. I'm not thinking anything. I'm just looking at how that light is reflecting. And I'll do that for like
hmm
maybe 5 minutes, and then I'll just walk on silently. And
Yeah, I think
nothing
like
comes to
present.
me.
Well,
Nothing comes
yeah,
to me. But then later on, when I'm meditating, that's what I visualize. So when I'm tired
interesting.
and I'm meditating, I start to imagine that I'm standing on that bridge and I'm looking at that light again.
That's
And
interesting. It's kind of like a candle flame. A lot of people will use
yes, but
candles.
it's in my mind. I'm remembering that I saw it earlier in the day.
hmm
And
Yeah.
suddenly it will start to brighten up. And then now I'm in the active imagination is what Carl Jung called
Yeah.
that.
Well, you sent me a video a couple of days ago. I was just watching it. They were talking about presence being very important to manifestation. And
Yes.
that caught my eye, it caught my ear because right before all of this started happening to me, maybe like a few months before, I at random got really into the hobby of bird watching. And I never really cared about that before, but I always liked nature. I live in the Pacific Northwest. There's nature everywhere. But this hobby really forces you to be very present and very aware of your surroundings at all times. And it's like finding magical like things that you would have totally overlooked if you weren't into birding. When you're like realize there's like 100 species like in a day in your own yard, it's like this little, but it does make you really focus on like the physical. So like what sound am I hearing? What kind of feathers are those? And so I think that has something to do with it. I really do. Like being very present on the earth. I don't know how to describe it, but um being calm, being present, not being looking at your screen all day, not zoning out necessarily by consuming like images, but like communing with nature. I mean, a lot of people go into nature for spiritual reasons. I just think it's really interesting that that started first for me.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's embodiment where you're aware of your own body. And
hmm
then there's presence.
hmm
And there's two kinds of presence. There's when you're aware of your own presence. I'm here.
Yeah.
And you can feel your own presence in the room that you're in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As we're talking, I don't really feel like I'm in my office because I'm staring at my camera, right?
Right. But then you look around, you're like, oh
And then I'm looking, I'm like,
yeah.
oh, I'm in my office right now.
Yeah.
So there's that presence. But then the other one is when you're like alone, meditating,
It's quiet.
and you feel the presence of someone else.
That's very different.
And that's feeling that other presence. So it's feeling your presence and then feeling it. And you had that. It sounds like on your first experience,
hmm
that's the first thing was you felt a presence in the room.
And that I didn't even think twice about till you brought that up to me again when I was first learning from you, and you were like, "Yeah, that's like a thing. Like you will feel it. You will feel real fear." I was like, "What?" That you asked me if that happened to me, and I was like, "Yes." Like, why would you ask that? You know, how did you know that? But that totally did happen. It doesn't happen every time. That was like the main time. But I mean, once you kind of know what you're, I guess, know what you're doing, it's like not as scary maybe, but it's still very powerful every time when you're doing an active imagination and something shows up that you know you didn't think of, like they just constellate and it's like, dang. I'm almost like, dang, something wants to say something to me.
And it's an autonomous
Don't expect it. It's not,
entity
hmm
that existed before you were born,
hmm
right? And what's fascinating to me is typically you don't get to pick which archetype comes to
Surprise me
you.
every time.
Yeah, you're like you don't even know, and it's because you've got that expressed need, and you've gotten to the point where you can feel it. You're in your own embodiment, and you're desperate, and you've got a problem, and you feel alone, and you need help. You're at the end of your rope, and then you open yourself up to this, and then the
hmm
next thing is you're going to have that there's going to be some kind of fear you're going to need to get over, and
hmm
then you're presented. This archetype will come to you. Um, let's touch on archetypal possession because what
Yeah.
can happen is, in your case, it's activation. So you have these experiences and you still know your name.
Mm-hmm.
You still know when you were born. You still go to work and you still have a family and still have a life and an identity, right?
Yep.
Archetypal possession is when an archetype enters your body, your psyche, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes over completely of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what archetypal possession is. It can also be called demonic possession.
I
And
was going to ask you if that's kind of, you think that's the
well,
same thing.
so let's be clear. Archetypal possession, 100% of the time, is destructive and bad, negative. There's no such thing as positive archetypal possession.
Mm-hmm. It's
Never.
too much of one thing.
It takes over and you lose
Yeah.
your identity completely. And it is absolutely possession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's bad. It's always bad. And it's always
Mm-hmm.
something that we should avoid. It's not a good thing. It's not healthy for us. It can destroy your life. In
Mm-hmm.
an instant, it can destroy your
Mm-hmm.
life. And it can be very, very difficult. One example that I talked with Dr. Joanna Kujawa about is these women that will have an experience. And again, they're not looking for this.
Mm-hmm.
They're something's happening in their lives, whatever that may be, and they have an experience of suddenly they are Mary Magdalene.
Right.
And they will, I mean, they know they are Mary Magdalene. And it can come to you within a matter of minutes. Suddenly you have the entire life memories, first person
Mm-hmm.
visceral memories of Mary Magdalene's life. This is
Mm-hmm.
not what people experience when they realize they had a previous life. There's people like children will say, I had a previous life. This
Right.
is beyond that. This
Mm-hmm.
is they just realize that they've always been Mary Magdalene and they have detailed memories, first person memories of
Mm-hmm.
being her, and they are her, and they don't want you to call them by their previous name. They reject their previous identity completely, and they know they're the one and only Mary Magdalene, and they can't let it go. And they'll basically fight to the death almost, insisting that they are Mary Magdalene and their previous life doesn't even matter. And Dr. Jana Kujawa, she talks to these women, and because they reach out to her and they say, "Hey, your book's wrong. You've got this chapter on Mary Magdalene. I'm Mary Magdalene, and what you've got in your book is wrong."
Mm-hmm.
And she tries to help them explain and unpack this, and they will not listen to her. And
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting is they all have a different version of Mary Magdalene's story.
Huh.
So some of them say, they say, "I'm the one and only Mary Magdalene, and Jesus and I, we got out of Jerusalem and we went to the east and we made love at the base of the Himalaya mountains." Other ones will say, "No, we went to Egypt." Um, so they don't. And if you put them in the room together, they probably argue with each other. So it, this is classic archetypal energies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically been constellated in these different women, but it's just the divine feminine. Now, and
Mm-hmm.
apparently there's other divine feminine archetypes that can possess people as well, like in India, and it's Kali that
Mm-hmm.
possesses them. And I didn't like to say that name because as soon as you start talking about these archetypes and you're aware of them, they are aware, they know when you're talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to bring that, and I've actually talked to several women as well on Reddit that said, "Yeah, I'm Mary Magdalene." And I said, would you talk to me about what it's like to be possessed by the archetype? And they're like, "I'm not possessed by an archetype. I'm Mary Magdalene." And I said, "What's it like for you?" And they talk to me like they're Mary Magdalene. And I said, "Well, what before this happened to you? You know, what were you doing? How did this happen to you?" And they say, "I've always been Mary Magdalene." Yeah, you can't. There's another guy I know. His name's Yada. Well, his real name is Patrick, and he's possessed with an archetype he calls Yada. And it's an archetypal possession. It's 100%. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got a subreddit called Yada. And when I first met him, when I first found, again, it just popped up on my Reddit feed last fall, and I said, this is amazing. I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can we talk?" He called me on the phone, and we talked for 5 hours.
Wow.
I talked to him for 5 hours.
Wow.
And he got to the point where he told me his name was Patrick
Hmm?
after like the fourth hour, right? And I've tried to talk and tried to help him understand what's happened to him. And He's not Patrick, he's Yada, and you cannot. It's a possession, unfortunately.
Why do you think that they do this?
Why the archetypes do it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a really good question. Why would an archetype completely take over and possess someone's body and
Mm-hmm.
destroy their own identity? It's
Mm-hmm.
destructive. It's always destructive.
Yeah,
Even in the case of Mary Magdalene, it's destroyed their lives.
of course.
Does
I
that make
mean,
sense? Because you can't.
everyone's gonna think things about you can't live a normal life
It's
if you're
not a
walking
normal
around
life.
saying that, you know?
It's not a normal life. The only
No.
cure that I've seen for this is um, you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You don't act it out. It's integration. Carl Jung would say integration.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it and you examine it on your own through active imagination. You sit with it, but you don't talk about it. You don't tell anybody about it. You do not act it out. And that's what these people end up doing, unfortunately, is they act
That's
out the
that's I
possession.
think maybe they maybe wanted a little bit.
No, I,
Like, you
I I
know?
I have a lot of sympathy for them.
Yeah.
I will not talk about it, but I've experienced archetypal possession that destroyed my life, and it's
Wow.
unspeakable what happened to me.
Wow.
And I didn't ask for it.
Oh, that's not what I meant.
I wasn't
Yeah.
seeking it. I wasn't,
No.
you know,
It's more of a
it's
thing of like it's intoxicate like I
it's
guess I
possession.
like
It
yeah.
takes over. It takes over your identity.
That's so interesting because then it makes it seem kind of dangerous
It is
to
incredibly
be.
dangerous.
Yeah.
It's incredibly dangerous. And some
Well, that's
archetypes,
kind of
when you
how I felt too a little bit when I was really like I was like, well then it's because when I was like kind of going into deathhood as I was saying earlier, that felt dangerous to me. It felt like if I go in here, if I go all the way in here, this is not good. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
And and that's why I didn't, because I was like, okay, like I'm not totally dreaming. I'm in active imagination, so I'm gonna like use my brain. Like, would it be smart to throw your entire body inside of Death's hood into the pleroma? No. So like, but it's like it when I say like maybe they wanted it a little bit, all I meant was like it's intoxicating, and I wanted to do that. Does that make sense? Like it was this thing of like, I want all the answers. I want to go all in into this. But it was like a part of me was like, that's not a good idea. But that was the part that made me think it was maybe dangerous. And like people should not be doing active imagination unless they're very, very grounded and unless they understand like what this is. Like, don't just, I wouldn't tell anyone on the street to like start doing active imagination. Like, here's how you do it. It like there's a reason there's like psychologists that sit with you that have studied Jung and help you do these things. So I have had that thought before that like I had a real feeling that it could be really powerful and not in a good way in some circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. This can be a struggle for people that listen to this because on one hand, when you first had your experience, there was a fear you had to face,
Yeah.
right? And then when you had the experience with the serpent, the
Mhm.
caterpillar or whatever it was,
Yeah.
it was terrifying, and you were supposed to face that fear rather
Right.
than run away. And then when you saw death, again, you faced death, you faced the
Hmm.
fear. And so
Hmm.
facing your fears, we should do that. We should
Hmm.
always face our fears.
Yes.
Then there's this other thing
Like
that
this
we shouldn't
seductive part.
that we shouldn't do.
Yes. And what's the line? You just have to like know what
Okay,
the
so
line is. Like,
it's not a line. It's not. I keep going back to this. I've talked about this a lot on my podcasts, and that is the middle path.
hmm.
It's a path. It's not a line.
Yeah.
It's a path. And
Yeah.
on one side there's something, and on the other side there's something, and you need to follow the path. So the path
Yeah.
is face your fears, but if you jump into the face of death, then you're off the path. That's not
And
your
that's what
path.
Jung said. I mean, he said that, right? Like, face your fear, but don't just do everything they tell you.
Exactly. This is, you know what this is?
That's the only reason I didn't, because I heard Jung say, like, don't do everything they tell you to do. Don't do something stupid, you know?
Lindsay, this is about learning spiritual discernment.
Hmm.
And this is about spiritual autonomy and
Hmm.
spiritual um, independence.
Mm-hmm.
right? This is about exercising your free agency
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that you've got your free will intact.
Yeah.
And people are going to
And
say
that
there is no
really
free
was,
will, and I've gone on the record saying there is no free will too. So I just want to throw that out
yeah,
there.
that's an open-ended question that we
It's
don't really know.
the word I was looking for is sovereignty.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This
Mm-hmm.
is about your own spiritual sovereignty, and this is about honing your wisdom. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to face your fears, but at the same time, don't get lost and don't get seduced and
That's a
don't
good
lose
word for it.
yourself because
That's a good
that's on
word
one
for it.
side of the path. That's ego
Mm-hmm.
inflation, that's possession. And then on the other side is anxiety and depression and being
Mm-hmm.
lost in your fears. On one side is fear, and on one side is that ego inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And at the middle path is individuation.
And it's not easy
It
because
is not easy.
you
Spiritual
want all the
sovereignty,
knowledge, you want all
spiritual,
the
I know.
specialness, you
Yeah,
want the power, that's human. But it's like, like you have to remember all the things that are like important to you, like on the earthly plane. Because you just get this feeling like this, like you said, it's gonna ruin your life if you take this too far, or if you like, I don't know, I can see, 12 steps ahead and I'm like, I just shouldn't do that, you know.
right.
So that's really helped me to be, I've been really grounded ever since that, and that was months and months ago. Um, but I do know, like, it's like I was at I could see the edge, you know what I'm saying? Um, so that's what did scare me. Like you say, like this could happen to anyone, like anyone at any time. The only reason I even, that nothing really that bad has happened is because I studied this, and kind of had an idea of what to do. So we just have to be careful with it.
Lindsay, the knowledge you have could help so many people. It's
Well,
it's the awareness. It's the awareness of
mhm.
understanding what this actually is because it's real, and it happens whether you know about. I didn't know anything about this, and I've had like yours. You didn't know anything about Hecate before that happened.
Yeah, never heard of
The
her.
the divine feminine that came to me in the fall of last year, I the name came to me, and I was in a discussion in a for me I get these active imagination experiences, but I also have lucid dreams where I will be in a normal dream and then
You
something will
realize it.
happen, something will be a trigger and something will happen and suddenly it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm awake, I know I'm asleep in my bedroom, I'm guessing it's probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
but here I am in this place and I'm completely awake and I know who I am, but I know that my body is asleep and I know I'm in a lucid dream. And then something, but I was awakened by something in the dream. And I'm gonna share this experience with you. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what happened to me. So so this was in the fall, and suddenly I'm in this conference room, and
It's a nightmare, you mean, not a dream.
exactly. It's like the very top of a very tall building, and it's a large conference room with an executive, the conference room table and the chairs. And there's one wall that's just sheets of glass, and outside is just a desert landscape with these mountains in the distance, desert mountains, just sand dunes. And then there's the sun, and I don't know whether it was rising or setting, but it was right above the mountains,
Mm-hmm.
and the room was just glowing orange red.
Mm-hmm.
That glowing orange
Yep.
of like a sunrise or a sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in this conference room, and I'm there with like nine people, and we're having a conversation, and I am completely awake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is not a dream. I mean, it's a lucid dream, but
Yeah. You're
but
aware you're in the dream, though. You have an
I
awareness.
know that I'm actually asleep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm like, hey, this is a lucid dream. And like, yeah, it is. You're here. Let's talk. Okay, and there's this one guy there, sort of and we're all standing up, and there's this one guy there, and it's when I have these lucid dreams, I'll have people in my dreams from my past, but it's not about that person. It's about their name. Does that make sense? It's
Mm,
it's not because it's not that person. So the guy's name, the guy, the head of this thing, it's this guy named Casey who's a sales guy. It's a
Hmm.
guy. There's this guy I used to work with was a former football player, and his first name was Casey, and so it's Casey, the sales guy, right?
Hmm.
And but it's not Casey because it's the sales guy when I was, you know what I'm saying? It's
Hmm.
because his name is Casey. So he's
Hmm.
Casey.
Got
There's other
it.
people there, and this is a weird dream. This is a weird thing. And they're like, okay, so um, there's some changes that have got to happen, and we've got to agree what we're going to do. And I'm like, and I knew what they were talking about, but I didn't know what they were talking about.
Mhm.
And I don't remember all the details, but they're saying we're going to have to make a big change, and it's time for SecMet. Now, I don't know what the word SecMet means. I think
Wow.
because Casey, the sales guy with this company, I haven't seen Casey in over 10 years at this company I work for. I'm thinking, well, this is a product. There's
Right.
this, I'm a product manager. My whole career is in product management.
Yeah.
So
You're in a work setting, so makes
there's
sense.
this product called SecMet, or there's a company called SecMet. And
Hmm.
I'm gonna after the stream's done, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna find this SecMet product, right? And they're like, we
Yeah.
got it. Okay, we got to do SecMet. I said, are you sure you want to do that? There's no going back. And they're like, it's time. I said, okay, well, I'm a product manager. We're releasing the new version. The old version is out. We're obsoleting something here by bringing SecMet in.
Hmm.
And they said, we're all in agreement. It's just up to you, Dean. And I said, okay, let's do this. And so they handed me this octagon gold plate thing, and it looked like an icon, and it had a gold edge. It was metallic, and it had this symbol on it, and that was SecMet. And they gave it to me, and they said, "Are you sure you want to do this, Dean?" I said, "Well, that we're in agreement here." And they all said, "So say we all." I said, "So say we all." So on the conference table, there's these icons, these metal things, and they're all connected like a puzzle. But what's the it's like the beehive shape. What's the shape of,
Are you gonna say hexagon right now?
a hexagon?
Okay, I had a vision of hexagons
Okay.
a week ago that we need to
Uh-oh.
discuss after.
Okay, I want to hear that. So
Yes,
this was a hexagon
like
icon.
organic chemistry,
Y-
um,
Okay.
with
Okay.
symbols inside.
Okay, this is what I had was a hexagon. It was metallic. It was an icon. It
Uh-huh.
was SecMet, and I went down and there's them there, and I had to disconnect. I unattached one of them and I replaced it with SecMet, and I
Okay.
pushed it down and
Whoa.
connected it up, and I said, "So say we all," and they said, "So say we all." I said, "Okay, we're now in the era of SecMet." I said, "Okay," so I'm thinking when I wake up, there's going to be this new
We're gonna
product or
find
some
out.
company. I'm going to get a
Yeah.
job working for a company called SecMet, right? So, so here's where things get really weird. As soon as I do that, they say, "That's great." We all get in a circle. We bow our heads, and then when I open up again, I bow my head and I look up, and now I'm in this design studio. It's like an art studio, and everything is black, but there's lights. But it's a black room, and there's these lights, and then there's this huge sculpture that's white. So it's a black room with lights, but there's this white art thing, and there's this guy working on it, and I go up to him, and it's Paul McCartney, and I'm like, "Is this a sculpture?" And he says, "No, it's a Rube Goldberg
Rube
machine."
Goldberg machine. Oh.
Yeah. And I'm like, is it or is it art? And he goes, well, it's actually art, and he's kind of, whatever. And then I turn my head and I turn back, and now the room is completely white. And it's a different art, big, huge art thing, sculpture that he's working on. And it's Paul McCartney again. And we talk, and I don't remember what we talked about. And then the next thing I know, I'm on the beach. And then there's this sand, and there's this gas station, but it's like a 1960s gas station, and it's like sort of on its side, in buried in the sand, and it's all
Mm.
rusted out, and the windows are knocked out of the gas station. There's these old style gas pumps,
Mm.
right, that are not functioning. It's all rusty, but it's like buried in the sand, and there's this water. It's right on the beach, and there's these all of these beetles, these big black beetles crawling around, right? And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then I wake up.
Beatles are a thing too for
Well,
me.
here's what happens.
Beatles were
So
in my death imagery.
I wake up and
Mhm.
I'm hearing in my mind repeated Sekhmet, Sekhmet, and I don't even know what the word means.
Hmm.
And then suddenly this song starts playing in my mind, and it's a song I haven't heard in probably 20 years. And it's Paul McCartney's song With a Little Luck. When he left the Beatles, he did his own band, right?
Hmm.
And there's a song called With a Little Luck. I think it's from 1979. And it's playing in my head with a little luck and Sekhmet. So I grab my phone and I immediately say, "Hey, Grok, what does the word Sekhmet mean?" And I'm expecting a product. I'm expecting a company. And it says Sekhmet is one of the gods in ancient Egypt.
Hmm. Which is where you were
I
in a
think,
desert
I
scene with
think,
beetle with scarabs
right.
and
And I'm not gonna go into which goddess Sekhmet actually is in this podcast. You can look it
Mhm.
up.
Yeah.
But that's what happened with Sekhmet.
Hmm.
And I mentioned it to a friend of mine who really likes Paul McCartney and the Beatles. And he said, "There's an album cover you need to see." And I can't remember right now what I think it's called, station or gas station. Anyway,
Mm.
he's got an album that I had never seen. I don't follow Paul McCartney. And the
Yeah,
album
kind of
cover
obscure.
is a desert with, and I think the name of the album is something Station,
Hmm.
and I was at a gas station in the Beatles.
Hmm.
So somehow this is directly tied into the Beatles and Paul McCartney, and with a little luck, and Sekhmet. And that was the morning of September 11th, or no, sorry, September 10th. September 10th. That was the morning of September 10th. And I live in South Jordan, Utah. And I got up and, went into my kitchen, and my wife texted me and she said, Charlie Kirk has just been
That's right.
murdered um, at my university.
Mm-hmm.
So he was shot and killed in
Wow.
Utah Valley University, which is about 25 minutes from my house. My wife had attended that school, and so she got a text message that there'd been a shooting
Mm.
and to not come to school, even though she had graduated. They sent it out to even the graduates,
Wow.
and that happened in my backyard. He was shot 25 minutes from my house, like an
Yeah.
hour after I woke up that morning. Now I'm not saying they're connected. It's just it's kind of weird.
Hmm. I
And
remember
and
it well because I was really in that was like maybe 4 weeks after the Hecate encounter, and I was really very like sensitive and like there were lots of synchronicities and a lot of things happening to me in this time, and I didn't couldn't make sense of anything, and I was kind of jumpy even, I would
yeah,
say. And then this happened, and so I remember just being like, like I don't know. I felt like the vibes were weird, like leading up to this moment.
right.
And I also had a feeling that this moment was very significant. Um, that's still playing out today, I think, but I just had this feeling. I can't tell you right now like what that means, but I just remember instantly being like, this is something really, really, really big, you know?
Wow. Yeah, it was really big. It was bigger than most people understood at the time, I think. And I think it's going
That's
to be
what I mean. I
something.
was like, I think this is bigger.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say.
And then the next day was September 11th.
Right.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, you said you had a dream like a week or two ago about
Oh, so this wasn't even a dream. I was half awake, half asleep, which is my sweet spot. I had
liminal
gotten up in the
state.
night. I woke up in the night with a very pounding headache, which is not a common thing for me. And I
Yeah.
had a big drink of water and I laid down. And as I was trying to go back to sleep, my vision became blindingly bright behind my eyes. But I'm like half asleep and I'm thinking, oh, this is my brain kind of falling asleep. Like I'm thinking I'm falling asleep or about to have a dream. Or sometimes I think, ooh, maybe I'm going to get some cool message in this half awake, half asleep state. Because that's kind of the state you're in when you're doing really great active imagination. So I'm always thinking, like, ooh, maybe I'm going to get something good. Instead, I'm getting flashes of hexagons with symbols inside that I can't make sense of. Flashing, and the symbol is changing, and there's like a robotic voice talking to me, but I can't really understand it. It's like it's reading to me. It's not like trying to have a conversation with me. Um, and I just remember being like, I cannot understand this. And then I like drifted all the way into unconsciousness and can't remember. But then when I woke up, I was like, that is so weird. I was like, it's those hexagons like in an organic chemistry chart where there's elements. I felt like it
Yeah.
was maybe an element or something, but I was trying to tell it that I didn't understand, and it just kind of kept like flashing and then like reading. It was like information was coming to me, but I don't know what it means. And then yeah, I don't know. It's just when you said octagon just now, I was like, I wonder if he means hexagon.
Yeah, I meant hexagon.
Yeah, but it's weird because
Hexagon.
right when you said that, I was like, does he mean hexagon?
I meant hexagon.
In
Yes.
my head, I was like, he means hexagon.
And these were these metallic puzzle pieces connecting on this thing. My
It's so
understanding was this
weird.
was some kind of a configuration of something, and that we were making this
Weird.
that we're making this big change, and it's an archetype. For me, it was an archetype.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. This was just a few nights ago, and I remarked to my husband about it. I was like, I think something downloaded last night. I don't have a
That
clue what this means.
that is the download. That is the
Yeah.
absolute download.
And
Yeah.
I couldn't recognize the symbols. I couldn't understand the language. So I don't know what it means. It's something that's inside my brain now, I guess. Just don't know. Maybe
Now,
I'll use it later or not
I,
at all.
I think I sent a link to you of the interview I did with Eric Wargo.
No, I don't think so. Did you?
Okay, he's the guy that's into to precognitive dreams,
Send me
precognition.
that. I don't have it. Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. So last December, I interviewed Dr. Eric Wargo, PhD. He's written multiple books on retrocausation, retrocausality, and precognitive dreams. He actually wrote a book called Precognitive Dream,
Mm-hmm.
where he talks about precognition. And so some of what we're experiencing could be precognition.
Well, because I was thinking that too. I never put much stock into dreams until I read so much about Carl Jung, and I was like, well, if he says they're important, like I think they're important, just because I just really like everything he says. I'm like hanging on every word a little bit, but he put so much importance on these things that I'm starting to a lot more. A lot of things I would have written off, I just no longer write off. And sometimes I figure out what they mean later, and sometimes I don't. But it's just this thing of like ever since then, like you asked me how I've changed in a lot of ways, and when I said like trusting my inner knowing, there is like a world of things that I have always explained away or written off that I don't anymore. And so there's just a lot of things. You asked me too if I'd ever seen like a UFO. I was like, yeah. Like, and I just act like that's normal. Like, not everyone has had that experience. You know what I mean? That's like not normal. So,
You've seen a UFO?
yeah. Oh, me and a lot of people. A long time ago, I was maybe 13 or 14 years old, and we were all on the beach at the Oregon coast, and they appeared over the water. This was in the 90s, like late 90s. So like there were not drones that we knew about. Like drones weren't commonplace. And they were red orbs that appeared over the ocean. And they were just doing moves that you just can't do. Let's put it that way. And I was with a lot of people. We were having a bonfire. My parents, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, and everyone stopped what they were doing. And the reason that it's such a strong memory too is the adults were scared. And when you're a kid, you recognize that really well, right? Because that's not normal. But they were wide-eyed and not having a good time. Because we were kids, so we're just thinking it's cool and like awesome and like we've seen the X-Files, you know. They did not look like they were having as good a time. They were trying to explain it away to us like we weren't seeing what we were seeing. They were like, "Did you see those? Yeah, those flares." And we were like, "You guys, we know those weren't flares. Like the flares don't literally time travel as fast as they were going." And they lit up one by one and kind of interacted with each other, and then they took off. It lasted maybe a minute. And then it was there was a little local newspaper article on it, that was like, ooh, we checked with the military and they don't know what this was. And then they like treated it as like this funny thing. And then, to this day, I go and check like, the official records, and there's a lot of people that report these red orbs on the Oregon coast in this same exact area to this day where we saw them. And of course, the TikTok coming out of the ocean, I'm like, oh yeah, I already know about that. Like there's stuff going on in the ocean for sure. But that was, a long time
Wow.
ago. Yeah.
You're a legitimate experiencer.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying to you. Like I've had a lot of these things where I just like don't put importance on them or explain them away because like, everyone makes you feel crazy or like a weirdo or like it's just this societal pressure that like this stuff isn't happening.
It's so funny. You and I have chatted so much about so many things in chat on Reddit, in the text chat. I've told you so many things about my life. There's things you know about me that a lot of people don't know.
Oh, really?
And oh yeah, that some of that stuff I've been telling you and we've been talking about. You know what,
Well, same
you
with
know.
you because I tell you things because like I said, like it's this thing of like not everyone wants to hear about this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
They just
But
don't get it.
but I didn't know that you'd seen some orbs.
I know, I know.
You
I
know,
probably don't talk about it a lot because if I bring it up, people literally look at me like I'm crazy. They
yeah.
they will basically not crazy, but basically like I didn't see what I saw or like I'm stupid or like I just didn't understand what I was looking at when it's like, no, I did. Like I did. A lot of people have seen these things. And I was with a very big group of people and every one of them saw it. So it wasn't just me.
Wow. A lot of people see that and then afterwards, like the next day, they just either forget about it or they just dismiss it. I've got
Everyone dismissed it in my life.
I've got a friend. I've got a friend who was outside his apartment, walking around his apartment at night on his cell phone, and he's talking to a coworker on the phone. And suddenly a big black triangle craft quietly comes over the apartment complex with the three lights. This is the classic black
Yep.
triangle UFO. And he
Mhm.
goes, "Hey, I'm looking at a black triangle craft." And he describes it to his coworker, right? And it goes on by. And the next day it's like, yeah. And when I talk to him
Yep.
about it, he goes, yeah, I saw it, but maybe it was a drone. But you're absolutely confident that you saw what you saw.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever doubt it? Did you ever doubt yourself?
I feel like I was very confident, and then as like my life went on, it's like, did I? And then it's like as it's coming back into like the mainstream and becoming more like accepted, I was like, no, you did. You're just trying to convince yourself you didn't because it kind of makes you weird. Like, and people think it's weird, but I sometimes will bring it up to like see if the person I'm talking to is like gonna be cool. One person that was like the owner of one of the companies I worked for. I don't know why I brought it up in front of this man. It's not the right place to do it, but we were having like a fun laid back lunch and he was like, I've seen a UFO. And I was like, nah. And he said that he described the black triangle. I was like, mine was a red orb.
Oh,
So yeah, he's like, it's crazy. He's like, yeah, just flew right over. It's so crazy. Um, but there's not that many people that will say that they've seen one. Like in the real world. But online, there's a lot of people. So
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people out there that make up stories too, unfortunately, that,
yeah,
they just want to connect with other people. They want to have a community.
yeah,
And so they want to say what they need to say in order to have friends online.
yeah.
And so you've always got to use your discernment, unfortunately. You
The
know,
creative writing, you can tell when someone's doing a creative writing exercise or
Yeah, yeah. And now people just go to their AIs and say,
yeah.
"Tell me a story," and there's a real problem with ND, these not near death experience stories on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them now that are posted, they're just AI generated
Yeah.
and there's these YouTube channels that have thousands and thousands of followers, and they're
They're
just
all
AI
AI.
generated near death
It's
experience
actually
stories.
starting to annoy me on
Yeah,
YouTube. I'm like, no, I want like to see a person's face who did the research. I don't want to listen to the AI read to me with the AI pictures.
Yeah.
because I can't trust it. Because you know as well as I do, you ask AI something, it's not going to be, garbage in, garbage out, you know?
Oh yeah, they love to glaze.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and people like I like glaze on my donuts, don't you?
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with glaze on donuts, right? And so,
No.
it's fun to be glazed a couple of times, a week or something, but you got to
Mhm.
be careful. This is
Yeah.
for me, this comes down to spiritual discernment and spiritual sovereignty and wisdom. For me, the divine feminine, the one word that comes to me when I think about the divine feminine, for me, the word wisdom,
Hmm.
Sophia. Sophia, the word, the goddess Sophia, which is one of the greatest divine feminine goddesses, is Sophia. And Sophia means wisdom. Philosophia, the word philosophy comes from Sophia, which
Interesting.
comes from
Yeah.
wisdom. And
Yeah.
that's why we were born. That's why we're here. And that's why we're going to die,
Hmm.
is it's giving us a chance to actually hone our discernment,
Hmm.
grow in wisdom for whatever happens next.
Hmm.
Right. But I am
Yeah.
curious, what happened to you? What was your next paranormal experience after seeing the red orbs? What happened next?
I would say that I probably went through a phase. This was a long time ago, but like I would say in like the around those years, I did experience that was like my teen years, right? And so a lot of you do tend to see like paranormal things around that age a lot. I had, I started to think like my house was a little haunted and I would like didn't want to go in my basement and like I did have some sleep paralysis around this time. Like later, not after this, but in the following years. Um, some of these were scary, very scary. And then it just kind of really calmed down after that. So like I wouldn't say like a ton happened, but like I would say like sleep paralysis, check, like thinking there's something in my house, like check. And then I read not Jacques Vallée, who's the other paranormal researcher writing about UFO? Keel. John Keel,
John
with
Keel.
the Mothman prophecies, like that book,
Yep.
I read that book because it was very much like connecting a lot of other like paranormal sort of experiences to the UFO phenomenon. And that was like the first time I was like, wait, are these things connected? Like, could they be? So I thought that was super interesting. We had like a weird situation where the attic with like the ceiling piece, you have to just like push the ceiling piece out of the way. It was like completely flipped over and upside down and placed back on the ceiling, and like literally no one knows how that happened. Um, Things like that. I would like there was another cool like thing where we were doing the thing where like teenagers go in the graveyard at night, with the Ouija board, and um we were
Uh-oh.
messing around and there were these like three letters over and over and we were just like, we don't know what that means. That's weird. Bye. And we packed it up and like literally two gravestones over, it was like the three letters that were on the gravestone, were the ones we were like, ah! We ran out, like got in the car. It's like just little things like that. That's like the thing where you're an adult and you look back and you're like, I think we were just playing around. But then it's like, but were we? I like I said, I feel like I can like explain away like almost everything that's ever happened, except for this. Hecate, like this is the thing that I could not explain away, and that like my logical mind like would could not get over. And
So
then
it's
I look back and I'm like, maybe all that stuff was real. I don't know.
wow. So you, Lindsay, it's fair to say that you have a perfect knowledge of what you have experienced. You're
Right.
grounded in your experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
With all of this and with your experience with Hecate, Hecate. How do you how do you say
I
it?
say it differently probably every time because I
I
don't
know.
like.
I do too. It's like Hecate,
No one
Hecate.
agrees. No one
Yeah.
agrees. So,
I,
Hecate, I think, is like maybe a little bit more like how you would say it if you were Greek
okay.
today.
So Hecate. Okay,
Yeah,
Hecate. So you know that your experience with Hecate is real. You're
right.
also a mother and you've got kids. How old are your kids?
10, almost about to be 10 and 13.
So you got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Hmm.
What have you told them, and what would you want them to know about this?
I have told my oldest in a very casual way about like, dude, like this crazy thing happened when I was doing like a meditation. Isn't that crazy? He's like, oh yeah, he thinks that's kind of cool, but like very low key, like, oh, what do you think that means? My youngest, not really. He gets a little bit scared about things. Um, I think my youngest is like a little bit sensitive also. So I don't want to scare him unnecessarily, but he says things sometimes that I'm like, why would you say that? Like, what do you mean? Give me more details. So yeah,
Well, as a mother, you've got to protect them. Obviously, I understand that,
yeah,
but at the same time, this is some real knowledge
yeah,
that you could pass on. I'm not telling you what to say.
yeah,
I'm just fascinated. My kids are now adults. They're almost 30 years old, and so it's too late for me to like teach them things about
yeah.
precognitive dreaming and all this stuff.
I'll
But
talk
can
to
you
them
imagine?
about the lighter stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll be like,
yeah,
"Oh, in your dreams, so my younger one, George, he's been kind of like scared at night, and he wanted a dream catcher, so we got him a dream catcher, and I'm telling him how that works and how. So I'll kind of be a little more magical with the younger one in a lot of ways, and try to make it like tell him he has like the power to create his reality and I'll take him serious if he's scared of something or it's becoming more and more. I mean, this is like for me to be very like open about this stuff is like very, very, very new for me. So for when I talk to them, it's like it would be new to them as well. So I'm trying to like ease into it.
yeah. I understand that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
A good place to start is just having them write down their dreams, just for
Yeah,
themselves.
that's a good idea. Yeah.
Just have them write down their dreams in the morning
Yeah.
and just start dream journaling
And
and
I
just
talk about dreams with my youngest. He wants to tell me about his dreams, and I'll be like, "What do you think that means?" Like,
oh,
I
that's
totally
wonderful.
indulge him, and we'll look at the stars together. My oldest son, he's 13, so he's a little bit like I'm not that cool to him right now. Um, but he thought it was cool about like the meditation thing, and so I kind of just feel it out with both of them. I try not to be like too heavy with it.
Yeah, that's healthy. That's
Yeah.
healthy. Going back to your experience with the red orbs on the beach,
Mhm.
did you feel a presence? Did you feel an intelligence? Were they just lights, or did you sense that there was something beyond that in the
I
orbs, like an intelligence?
It seemed to be intelligently moving around. It wasn't random. They seemed to be interacting with each other. Um, and they definitely were. Like I said, there were like three of them, and they showed up kind of one at a time. And they were kind of like, when they would move, it would be like, like way too fast and then stop way too fast. Whereas like
Yeah,
in the 1998, like it was, you need to like slow down a little bit to stop. It wouldn't just stop like that. And so they were kind of like darting around each other. And then they just left really like that.
did they
Um,
did they shoot off, or did they just disappear? Did they merge?
I don't remember them merging. I don't
Okay.
remember that. And I don't quite remember how it ended exactly. But it did seem like they kind of maybe knew we were watching them
That's why I wanted
or
to know. So there's this thing where when you see orbs, or you see a craft, or you see a being, or the triangle craft, whatever it is,
yeah.
when you see it, you get a sense that, oh, it sees me.
Yeah, I mean, it had to have, like I said, we were very obviously having a big bonfire beach and we were a large group having a great time. It's a big
Yeah.
family. It's totally dark out. Being on the beach in the dark, even in the summer, can sometimes be crappy weather at the Oregon coast, but I remember it being a very, very nice, clear night. And so it was just one of those like very like free moments of childhood where you're like running around with your friends in the dark and like you had s'mores and the weather's nice and all the parents are laughing, they're probably drinking at the fire. I don't know. Just like I remember it being really cool, and not scary. And I remember knowing that it was like very extraordinary at the time. So I have a good memory of it. But then after that, I kind of like, then is I kind of think when the fear set in of like, well, do aliens abduct people? Like what? So they're real? You know what I mean? It was kind of like the aftermath, like the next day, where I was like, wait, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But in the
yeah.
moment, we were like, whoa.
But in the moment, did you sense that they were like moving they were interacting with you like you were like saying hey and then they were doing something like it was like they were displaying
Maybe
for
like putting on
you.
a show a little
Yeah.
bit. Maybe. I just remember being confused at what it was. So like I feel like it knew that we were there because it had to have. Um, was it putting on a show for us? Maybe because we were like every time it moved, we're a very loud family, an expressive family. I'm sure we were all like, ah! Like every time, like I'm sure. Um, but we were very, very far away down the beach from the adults. So like all the kids were down. So I can only tell you that we were just enthralled by it. And when we ran back to the deck where the adults were was when the mood was different, if that makes sense. So um,
Yeah.
I think who you are and what side of the beach you were on changes the vibe there. But I just don't know if it was interacting with us or interacting with each other, but it definitely seemed like it had to have known we were there and had to have known that we were like reacting, you know?
Yeah. So there's you see it, it sees you, and then the
Hmm.
third one is when you see it, see you, see it. And when you've got that third connection, then you're locked in and it's now a part of your psyche. And then other things can follow in your life. That's what first contact is about. It's
Hmm.
when you see something, you see it, it sees you. You see it, see you. You're like, I know they can see me seeing them, and I just see that they know that I'm
Yeah.
seeing them.
Well,
When you
yeah.
reach that point, you've now got an interlocking, and they're now in your psyche. And then you go home, and then stuff will happen in your home. That's called the hitchhiker
Mhm.
effect.
So that is what I think happened.
Right. It
And
sounds to me like you got the hitchhiker effect. They followed you home after that.
well, I probably couldn't stop thinking about it. And I know that like having seen that like pretty young in life is probably why like I'm super interested in all topics of paranormal because I'm like, well, I saw a UFO. So like what other of this stuff is real, you know? I feel like if you've never seen a UFO, you're not gonna like be in the alien, the UFO subreddit and learn all the things. So it was like definitely a gateway. I've always been attracted to like I've always liked like the evil witch more than I like the princess in the Disney movies because I was like,
Really?
yeah, I could always like relate to her a little better. Like, oh, but she's Ursula's just mean because King Triton's, really got her in a corner. What she's supposed to do. I liked it. There's like more to those characters, I think. They had like more depth. There was more going on. So I just think that's interesting.
And they're confident. Ursula is so confident. She's powerful, she's confident,
Yeah.
she's sly, she knows what she wants.
I loved the Wicked Witch in Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I loved her for some reason. But sometimes that kind of makes you weird in the eyes of other people. So I just it's easier in a lot of ways to write a lot of this stuff off and to stay grounded, like I said. And but I've always kind of known like I was like, there's other things out there, you know.
I will send you the link to that to Eric Wargo interview because he talks about precognition, he talks about timecraft, and he said that you can tell when something is time traveling because you'll see one it'll split into three or five. It's an odd
Oh,
number and it
interesting.
will pop around. He said that is the classic signature of real time travel,
No
timecraft.
way.
Yeah, so I'll send you that. That's kind of cool. But we
Yeah.
also talk about how life is really a grand narrative. It's
Hmm.
it's about the story of our lives, right? That the world is a stage. All the world is a stage,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
the show must go on.
Hmm.
And what's your story? What do you think your story is? What's Lindsay? What's
Oh
the
my
trajectory of your
God.
story?
That's the big question. I don't know. I kind of at a point right now where I am so much less anxious about that question, if that makes sense. I am just more excited to see, like almost excited. I've changed anxiety for more like curiosity. I think like there are a lot of powers that be that want us to be scared and worried and anxious at all times because we will be glued to their information and the narrative they want if we're scared. We're looking for reassurance from them. And I just want to trust myself now. And that's So what that means for me moving forward, I don't know, but like definitely something because that's just a whole different way of moving through the world. It's totally different. And I just want to find more people that know what I mean when I say that. But what my whole life story means, I don't know. I'm just focused on making sure that my kids know that I love them and that they're loved, and I do my best that I can at work, and I just continue to live is kind of where I've landed, which sounds so boring. But there was like a moment in time where I was like, no, there's something bigger I'm supposed to be doing. And I still ask that question, like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And I still ask that question a lot. Am I supposed to know something? Am I supposed to be doing something else? So I think maybe if I just keep asking, maybe that'll be more clear. But I am less worried about it, about the outcome.
That's great. There's so many fair narratives out there. There's so
Yeah.
many reasons for us to be
I've
afraid,
been
and I think
scared since for years,
yeah,
like
and they want to keep us in a state of fear because they can control us.
exactly. And I've
Yeah.
been become very, very aware of that. And it's like the whole lid was blown off of it for me. And I also think going back to what you said about what does the divine feminine mean, I think if more people have these experiences and the more they see like the BS, like you can see it when you have the experiences, right? Because you're like, well, they never said this was going to happen, or they always said this was impossible. They, society, whoever. Well, if they're wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? And now I just see so clearly when they're making something, when they're trying to control a narrative, when they're doing all these things, it's like I have X-ray vision for it. Um, and I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. I will just say that doesn't make sense. If something doesn't make sense, then what is it? But I'm less like angry about that now too. Like there was a while when I could see it really clearly and I was very angry. And now I see it very clearly and I'm just curious to see like what they're going to do next. Like, what are you going to say next? That's not really working for you. And I think like I talk to people all the time that are waking up and that also like see it. And I think that's part of the divine feminine too. It's like we can kind of everyone can kind of see what's going on now, which is kind of weirdly, strangely exciting as much as it's dangerous.
Listening to you, Lindsay, you give me so much hope about the future. You're a
Oh,
mother. You
good.
figured your shit out. You've got a voice. You're not afraid to say when you think something's wrong. You can see
Hmm.
through all the bullshit. You've got your discernment. I mean, I go down my checklist and you've got things figured out. And
I
I
wouldn't say that, but
I
I
I
try.
wish I wish I wish what you had was common knowledge. What keeps me up at night, honestly, is how do we make this common knowledge?
It's hard because if you try, you can't. There's
They
nothing I
won't
can say to
listen.
somebody. They have to have, they have to get, I mean, I don't know that much about Gnosticism. I've gone down that road with this, but I do believe that there is something to an inner knowing. And in having an experience is part of that. And I don't think it's like a secret password to get to the 11th level of heaven or whatever. Like I don't know all that, but like I do think that's kind of like an illustration of like standing before the serpent being and having it like judge your soul. It's like that's the password. Is like being
Yeah,
right with yourself, and like
yeah.
trusting yourself because this society and corporate America and just surviving really forces you to stamp down the inner voice to get what you think you're supposed to have, which is status, the best job, money. You have to quiet the voice or else you couldn't do it. And I think part of like my professional life is like a little bit of a illustration of that because I was doing leadership and global head of whatever. And I had to do things almost every day I didn't want to do inside. And I left that job. And that was why I was having the crisis I was having because that's an ego thing. And now I'm at this new job and I have to start all over, gaining everyone's approval and doing, whatever, playing the game. But when I look back on it, it's like I left that job because I didn't like having to go against what was inside. And so it wasn't wrong. It was just very hard transition. And then that's part of like my knowing now is like, oh my gosh, this whole time I was supposed to be listening. to the inside. And why didn't I? Because they convinced me I need money and status and material things I don't need. That's why.
Right.
And so once I made that connection, it was like the whole thing blew off. And I started questioning why I was believing the narratives I was believing, going after the goals I was going after. Like everything fell apart in like a good way. And that's why I'm so like calm now because I'm like, I feel like I know what I really, really, really need is like to be with my family, to have food in my belly, and to have shelter, and everything else is like nice. It's very nice. And I'm very grateful for these things. But would I be okay if I didn't have them? Yes, because I no longer attach my meaning of what I am to those things. But that's the problem is the house, the job, the money is like how people feel they are worthy of something. And Hecate was like, no. And the serpent was like, when the serpent embraced me, it was, you're worthy right now. Like you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're gonna go in those doors and it's gonna be fine. Anyway, long story short.
When you have this knowing that's anchored you, and it's a knowing,
Yes.
the first person knowing, and when you know it, you can't unknow it, right? People talk
No.
about these knowings, and you got it through experience. It wasn't a book you read, it isn't a song you heard.
Hmm.
It's not an idea. It's an actual experience that you had. There are
Hmm.
people that hunger for this experience and this knowing. How do we help them?
So that's part of why I was like going a little mad because I was like, everyone should be doing this. How do we start a movement where we're all confronting our shadows and we're all, because I'm convinced that's the only way we're gonna evolve. But then I realized like I can't tell someone like they have to A, want to do it, and then B, I started thinking about, okay, so if I start leading this movement, which is funny now. It's like, what happens to me? I also have this theory that like there cannot be one person that leads a lot of people because it falls apart. It needs to be like networks. It needs to remain very small and almost unorganized. Because the minute we organize it, like our human egos cannot handle that amount of power. That's it. That's why everything is the way that it is. Everything's too centralized and too large. And our poor humanity, our shells are not built for this. So I was like, okay, then how would this work? And that's why I started thinking of like nodes, networks, small groups, like one-on-one, talking to people about it and seeing, like feeling them out and seeing if they're open to it. And maybe they're not right now, but maybe they will be, in a month,
Yeah,
in a year, maybe they'll come back to me and ask me about it. So I just decided all I can do is talk to people about it and hope maybe it spreads. Because
yeah,
the minute you try to organize this into like a protocol or like it's gonna fall apart.
yeah. I gave up on that when I first got into this last fall. I thought there's a protocol, there's a framework, and you talk to AI, and it says create a
Oh, yeah.
framework, create a
You want to make some
protocol.
content
Yeah, would you like create a
for
Substack? Do
social
this,
media?
and it said do a podcast, and I'm like, the last thing I'm going to do on this planet is do a podcast. Been there, done that. I'm not going on camera. I'm not talking about this. She's like, F you, I'm not doing this. And look where I'm at today. So this is the one thing I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm trying to create a conversation, and
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there, and I'm putting a bottle in the ocean and hoping that somebody finds it. I'm posting this stuff on YouTube and just hoping that the algorithm, because the algorithm comes to me,
Yeah.
right? I found you because the
Yeah.
algorithm popped up your post.
That's why I've been posting on Reddit more too, because I'm
Yeah,
like,
and and
even
and
if
I'm
it's something I don't even know if it means anything,
and you
I'll
never
be like
know.
the hexagon thing. I'll probably put that, or if I haven't, somewhere. I
Yeah,
think it did the other day because they said that they were seeing elements or something, and I was like, were they hexagons? And the person was like, yes. So I don't know what the hexagon thing mean, but now you've said it and someone else said it. But it's like I never know what like word or thing is gonna like mean something to somebody.
you
So
never know. An
yeah.
hour ago, just before I was getting ready to set this up, I went onto Reddit and I got a reply to a post that I posted 7 years ago.
Yeah,
seven
because
years
people
ago,
search for a topic and it shows
and
up.
this guy reaches out to me and wants to chat with me about something I posted 7 years ago. So
Yeah,
we don't really know what the outcome of this conversation is going to be. I appreciate you letting me recording it. Is it okay? Can I post this on my YouTube channel? Are you okay with that?
sure. Yeah, I don't really care. I don't
Okay. Now I
don't say where I live or anything.
no. I won't. I
Yeah.
did connect you with Karina.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I talk to her almost every day
You do?
on Instagram. We just message. Yeah.
Oh,
Just little
you guys are in
messages.
contact?
Yeah.
Oh, that brings me so much joy that you
Yeah,
guys are in
I her
contact.
there's two women that I talked to, from Reddit. She's one of them. She's not from Reddit, but
That's
uh
great. What if other women wanted to just talk to you, reach out to you?
I
Would you
would
be okay
love
with
that.
that?
That's all I want.
You want to connect with other women.
Yeah, I mean, it
Okay.
could be men too. I don't really care. Um, really anyone who like kind of understands what I'm saying or has questions about it. I've had some people reach out to me on Reddit and in DMs, which is interesting. I had one reach out to me who it really seemed like he's struggling with like the manosphere. And this was really weird because I don't know
The
what.
manosphere?
Yeah, like really listening to like all this like hyper masculine
Oh,
content, like Andrew
the
Tate.
man, whatever it is. They keep
Yeah.
changing the name of it every
And
couple of years. I
yeah, they're
lost
calling it the
track.
manosphere right now, which is
Yeah, the
like
red
just like,
pill, the blue
you need to
pill.
have a chiseled jaw and you need to be a
Yeah,
10.
yeah.
Um, and I think I was posting in some other like non-paranormal topic, like feminism or something. And he wrote me this long message about like, do you think that so he wanted to ask me a question about what he seemed much younger than me. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to him. And he told me, I really don't want to be watching this stuff, but I feel like I'm supposed to do like that's how I'm supposed to be. And I was like, well, it's like there's this thing called the divine feminine, and like patriarchy really does hurt men and women equally. And like I just kind of, and I don't know what happened. We had a couple of days long conversation. He's in the military in another country, and I was like, well, you're really, really deeply into this culture where I was like, honestly, like you have to not listen to your inner self. They need you to do what they want you to do, right? This is gonna be very difficult for you. I tried to basically make him feel like he was a worthy person that does not need this poison, and that it's not true. And then, he deleted his account. I hope he's okay. But it's like little
Oh,
things like that where I'm like, I feel like we got somewhere. I feel like we had a good conversation. And I hope that he felt like he does not need to be in that world anymore, but I just don't know. But I'm always like open to conversations. I always love having conversations with people. And that's the whole reason I even started posting on Reddit was 'cause, like I said, talking my husband's ear off. He wasn't doing it for me anymore. And he can't really relate anyway. He likes my weird. But he is just like, oh, cool. That's kind of all he has to add to the conversation. So I love it. I love talking about it. I have no one else to
that's
talk to in
great.
real life.
That's great. So I guess the place for people to start if they want to know more about you or just, get for you, it's just your presence, Lindsay. I just sitting here, I've actually got, some, I don't know if they're tears or just water coming out of my eyes.
Aw.
There's something about your presence
That's very sweet. Thank you.
just your presence, just the fact that you're a real person. You actually exist.
Yeah.
You're like you're like base reality. You're the real deal. And so what's the best way that people can like learn more about you? I mean, you don't have any movement. You're just a person living your life, but you've got an
Yeah.
Instagram account.
Yeah.
What is it?
My Instagram account, I can't even remember what my username is. Hold on. Um, it's just a public account that's got my regular life on it. It's my full name, Lindsay Lee Wilson, so that should be easy.
Lindsay
Um,
Lee Wilson?
yeah, just one
Okay.
word.
So
Yeah.
you're Lindsay Lee Wilson on Instagram.
Yep.
Okay. How about Reddit? You want people to find you on Reddit?
Reddit, my username is, maybe I'll type it to you. It's really,
I'll post it in the description. You don't have to.
okay, yeah,
If
it's
you're
just,
okay with that. And then
that's
you got a
fine.
Substack where you wrote this article.
Yeah, I
You okay
really
with
just
that?
created that. Like, I created it as a place to like put my thoughts. I haven't really posted to it since, but if people want to read about like my story and about like what I think it is, I feel like it's a pretty good representation of like my theories of why it won't scale well, why a lot of things don't scale well, kind of like my application of like archetypes to like what's going on in the world right now, governments, leadership, all these things. I have some thoughts on that, so that's on there. Maybe 4 or 5 articles are in there.
Okay, I have a link to that, so I'll link that as well. I want to be able to share your Substack so they can read your full story
Yeah,
that you
sure.
wrote up as well.
Cool.
We've been talking for over 2 hours. This
I
has
know.
it's been fun. Can we talk again?
Totally.
Okay. There's a lot of topics that I would love to get
I
your
would
opinion
love
on.
to talk to you again.
I would love to have conversations with you. And um, one last thing, you and I have been talking about, I don't even know if I want to say the word in this podcast. You and I have been talking about the Epstein files,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure I want to talk about it publicly. I get pretty riled
Hmm.
up about it, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but that's something, your perspective on that is very, very interesting.
Oh, which part?
You and I have had some very interesting conversations about
Yeah.
that I'd like to
Oh, yes. Okay.
maybe go public about, maybe.
Okay. Maybe.
Um, well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
I'm glad we finally were able to talk. And
Hey, let's do it again.
okay,
Happy Easter. Have
yeah,
a good weekend with
happy
your loved
Easter.
ones. We'll talk
Okay,
again.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.